My wife laughed and said, "What? You think you're my only option?" During an argument about respect. I said, "Definitely not." Then I made sure she had other options by doing something she never saw coming. She stopped laughing when she found out. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, each drop hammering against our dining room window like tiny fists demanding to be heard. I remember thinking how fitting it was. The weather matching the storm brewing inside our home, inside my chest, inside the marriage I'd spent 12 years building, brick by careful brick. Sarah sat across from me at the table we'd picked out together in that overpriced furniture store in Boston, back when we were still pretending money didn't matter as long as we had each other. Her fork scraped against the porcelain plate, not the everyday dishes, but the good china her mother had given us, the set we only used when we were trying to prove something to ourselves. She wasn't eating so much as rearranging the salmon I'd prepared, pushing it around like a chess piece she couldn't figure out how to move. "You're not listening to me," she said, and I could hear the edge in her voice, sharp as broken glass. "You never listen." I set down my wine glass, a 2019 Cabernet from a vineyard we'd visited during happier times, and looked at her, really looked at her. When had the light in her eyes gone out? When had the woman who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and fall asleep with her head on my shoulder become this stranger who flinched when I tried to hold her hand? "I am listening," I said quietly. "You said I work too much. You said I'm not present. You said you feel like you're living with a roommate instead of a husband. See, you're just repeating words. That's not listening, Marcus. That's performing." The thing about long marriages is that you develop a sixth sense for when an argument is about to cross a line. You can feel it in the air like the electrical charge before lightning strikes. I felt it then, sitting in that dining room with the rain as our only witness. And I should have backed away. I should have suggested we table the discussion, take a walk, breathe, but I didn't. "What do you want from me, Sarah? I've been busting my ass for this family. The consulting firm, the clients, the travel. It's all so we can have this." I gestured around our renovated Victorian home in Cambridge, with its exposed brick and designer appliances and mortgage that cost more than most people's annual salary. She laughed then. Not a real laugh. Nothing like the sound that used to fill our apartment when we were 26 and broke and happy. This was something else, something hollow and cruel. "This?" She looked around as if seeing the house for the first time. "You think I care about this? You think a house makes up for the fact that you're never here? That when you are here, you're somewhere else in your head? That's not fair." "Fair!" Her voice rose now, sharp enough to cut. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about fair, Marcus. Let's talk about how I've spent 12 years supporting your career, moving for your jobs, putting my photography on hold so you could chase the next promotion. Let's talk about how I can't remember the last time you looked at me like I was something other than furniture." I felt my jaw tighten. "I have never treated you like furniture." "No? Then what was I at the Harrison party last month?" "Oh, right, the wife, the accessory, the woman who stands next to you and smiles while you network and glad hand and pretend you're not counting the minutes until you can check your email." The rain grew louder, or maybe it was the blood rushing in my ears. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor we'd had refinished last spring. "You know what? Maybe if you actually contributed something beyond complaints and criticism, I'd have more time to focus on us. But every time I walk through that door, it's this constant evaluation of everything I'm doing wrong." Her eyes went wide, and I knew immediately I'd made a mistake. "You don't tell your wife she doesn't contribute. You don't say that. Not even when you're angry. Not even when part of you believes it might be true." "Contributed?" She stood too, and now we were both on our feet, the untouched dinner between us like a no man's land. "I gave up my career for you. I manage this entire household while you get to play corporate warrior. I deal with your mother's phone calls and your father's dementia care and the contractors and the bills and everything else that keeps your life running smoothly so you can focus on being Marcus Chen, the brilliant consultant. No one asked you to give up your photography. Are you serious right now?" Her voice cracked. "Are you actually serious? When we moved to Chicago for your job, there was no market for my work. When we moved to New York, you were working 80-hour weeks and someone had to hold down the fort. When we came here to Boston, I was 37 years old trying to break back into an industry that had passed me by. Don't you dare stand there and act like it was my choice." I should have stopped. I should have taken a breath. counted to 10, done any of the things our couples therapist had suggested during the 3 sessions we'd attended, before Sarah declared therapy performative and refused to go back. Instead, I said, "It was your choice. You chose this life. You chose this house, this lifestyle, these vacations we take twice a year. You don't get to have it both ways." The silence that followed felt alive, dangerous. Sarah's hands were shaking. I could see them trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, measured, and somehow more frightening than when she'd been yelling. "You really think that's what this is about? Money? Things? I think you like to pretend you're some kind of martyr when the reality is you have a pretty good life. Most people would kill for what we have." She looked at me then with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Not anger, not hurt. Something colder. Something that felt like contempt. "I want a divorce," she said. The words hung in the air between us. I remember the sound of the rain suddenly seeming very far away, like someone had wrapped our entire house in cotton. I remember thinking this was it. This was the moment everything changed, and feeling strangely calm about it. "Fine," I heard myself say. "If that's what you want, that's what I want." We stood there for a moment longer. Two people who had once promised forever to each other, now strangers in an expensive house with cold salmon and colder hearts. "I'm not leaving tonight," she said finally. "It's late and I'm tired, but tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer. Do whatever you need to do." She turned to walk away, then stopped at the doorway. Without looking back at me, she said, "You know what the worst part is? I don't even think you'll miss me. I think you'll just be relieved you don't have to pretend anymore." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to say that of course I'd miss her, that I loved her, that this was all just a terrible argument that had gotten out of hand. But the words stuck in my throat, and maybe that was its own kind of answer. She went upstairs. I heard the guest bedroom door close, not slam, just close, which somehow felt worse. I sat back down at the table and looked at our ruined dinner, at the wine that had probably cost more than our first apartment's rent, at the life we'd built that was apparently worth nothing. That's when I noticed her phone on the table, screen facing up. It lit up with a notification. I shouldn't have looked. In a healthy relationship, you don't look. But we weren't in a healthy relationship anymore. We were in whatever came after. The message preview showed on the lock screen, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Leave the husband to his spreadsheets and come and have a real conversation for once. D." I stared at that message for a long time, long enough for the phone to go dark, long enough for the rain to slow from a downpour to a steady drizzle, long enough for something inside me to shift and harden and crystallize into a decision. I picked up my own phone and opened my contacts, scrolled to a name I hadn't called in almost 3 years. My college roommate Jason, who'd gone into private investigation after his stint with the FBI. We drifted apart after he'd made some comments at our wedding about Sarah that I'd found insulting at the time. Looking back, maybe Jason had seen something I'd been too in love to notice. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Marcus? Jesus, man, it's been forever. What's up?" I looked at the stairs where Sarah had disappeared, then back at her phone with its incriminating message. "Jason," I said quietly, "I need your help, and I need you to be discreet. This about Sarah? How did you know?" He sighed. "Because you only call me when something's wrong, and the only thing that could make you sound like that is relationship trouble. What's going on?" I told him about the argument, about the divorce demand, about the message I'd just seen. "I need to know if she's having an affair," I said. "And if she is, I need evidence. Can you do that?" There was a long pause. Then, "Marcus, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you know, you can't unknow it." "I'm already going down this road, Jason. The question is whether I'm going down it blind or with my eyes open." "All right," he said finally. "I'll need a few days to set things up. In the meantime, act normal. Don't let her know you're suspicious. Don't confront her about the message. Just be the husband she expects you to be." "Which is what exactly?" "Oblivious," he said. And there was no judgment in his voice, just fact. Be oblivious. After I hung up, I sat in that dining room for another hour, listening to the rain and thinking about choices and consequences and the woman upstairs who I'd promised my life to, who had apparently promised hers to someone else. I thought about the message. Leave the husband to his spreadsheets. Was that how she talked about me? Was that how she saw me, not as Marcus, not as her partner, but as the husband? some obstacle to be worked around. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs and demand answers, to wave her phone in her face and watch her try to explain it away. But Jason was right. If I wanted the truth, the full truth, I needed to be patient. I needed to be strategic. I needed to be the thing Sarah apparently thought I was: cold, calculating, focused on the outcome rather than the emotion of the moment. So I cleaned up our untouched dinner. I washed the good china and put it back in the cabinet. I finished the bottle of wine, standing at the sink and looking out at our backyard where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties and all the rituals of a life that now felt like an elaborate performance. When I finally went upstairs, it was past midnight. The master bedroom was empty. Sarah had made good on her promise to sleep separately. I could see a sliver of light under the guest room door, could imagine her lying there, probably texting whoever D was, probably planning her escape from a marriage she'd apparently checked out of long before tonight's argument. I lay in our bed, my bed now, I supposed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, a pipe creaked. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind that particular quiet that follows a storm when the world is catching its breath before starting again. I thought about the question I'd asked Jason. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Was I? But even as I asked myself that, I knew the answer. Because the thing about betrayal is that once you suspect it, once it gets under your skin, it doesn't matter if you want to know. You need to know. The not knowing becomes its own kind of torture. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Started composing a message to my office manager explaining that I'd need to work from home more over the next few weeks. Family matters, I wrote. Need to be flexible with my schedule. It wasn't a lie, it was family matters. Just not the kind anyone would want to have. As I hit send, my phone buzzed. A message from Jason. I've got a guy in Boston, former surveillance specialist. He'll start tomorrow. I'll send you updates every 48 hours. And Marcus? I'm sorry, man. I really hope I'm wrong about this. I typed back on me too. But I didn't hope that. Not really. Because part of me, a part I wasn't proud of but couldn't deny, wanted to be right. Wanted proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things, wasn't the villain in this story. Part of me wanted Sarah to be guilty because if she was guilty, then I could be the wronged party. The victim, the one who had every right to walk away with his head held high and his conscience clear. I set my phone on the nightstand and closed my eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Tomorrow, everything would begin. The surveillance, the secrets, the careful dance of pretending everything was normal, while collecting evidence of how thoroughly abnormal our marriage had become. Tomorrow, I would start becoming the person I needed to be to survive this. Someone careful, someone calculating, someone who played the long game. Tomorrow, I would start making sure Sarah had other options, because if there's one thing I'd learned in 12 years of marriage and 15 years in consulting, it's this. The person who controls the information controls the narrative. And I was done letting Sarah control our story. The rain started again, softer this time, and I finally drifted off with that sound in my ears and a plan forming in my mind. A plan that would take weeks to execute, that would require patience and precision and a willingness to look directly at truths I'd spent years avoiding. Fell asleep thinking about justice, about evidence, about the moment when Sarah would finally realize she'd underestimated me. I fell asleep imagining her face when she stopped laughing. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sunlight streamed through our bedroom windows, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. If you didn't know any better, you'd think it was the start of a beautiful day in a beautiful home owned by a beautiful couple living a beautiful life. But I knew better now. I heard Sarah in the guest bathroom, the shower running, the familiar sounds of her morning routine. How many times had I woken to these exact sounds? How many thousands of mornings had begun just like this, with water running and the smell of her lavender shampoo drifting through the hallway? The difference was that before, those sounds had meant home, comfort, partnership. Now they meant something else entirely. I got up and dressed in my standard work uniform, pressed slacks, button-down shirt, the armor of respectability. In the mirror, I looked exactly like I always did. Marcus Chen, successful consultant, put-together professional, man who had everything figured out. The mirror, like most things, was a liar. By the time I made it downstairs, Sarah was already in the kitchen. She'd made coffee, her own cup, in her favorite mug, the one that said, Nevertheless, she persisted that she'd bought after the 2016 election. There was no second cup waiting for me. That omission felt deliberate, symbolic. Morning, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She glanced at me and I saw her evaluating, trying to gauge my mood, assess whether I was going to continue last night's argument. I watched her shoulders relax slightly when I simply moved to make my own coffee. Morning, she replied. We moved around each other like dancers who'd memorized the choreography. She at the island, with her laptop open, probably checking her email or browsing Facebook, me at the counter measuring out beans for the grinder. The French press we'd bought together at a kitchen supply store in Portland sat between us, another artifact of better times. I have a lunch meeting with Lauren today, Sarah said, her tone carefully casual. Probably won't be back until late afternoon. Lauren, her best friend from college. Or at least that's who Sarah had told me Lauren was. But now, with that text message from Dee fresh in my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if Lauren was real, or just a convenient cover story. Sounds good, I said. I'm working from home today, conference calls all afternoon. This was true. I had scheduled them specifically so I'd be here when Jason's surveillance expert made contact. The first rule of any investigation: establish patterns, understand movements, build a baseline of normal behavior. Sarah nodded, already distracted by whatever was on her screen. I noticed the way her fingers moved across the keyboard, quick, practiced, the typing rhythm of someone who spent a lot of time on messaging apps. Was she texting him right now? Planning their lunch while I stood 3 feet away, grinding coffee beans? Sarah, I said, and waited until she looked up. About last night, I saw something flash across her face. Fear? Hope? I couldn't quite read it. What about it? I think we should probably talk. Really talk. Maybe not today, but soon. Figure out what we're doing here. She studied me for a long moment. You mean figure out how to separate without destroying each other? The words hit harder than I expected. She'd said when, not if. In her mind, this was already over. The marriage, the partnership, the life we'd built, all of it was just paperwork, waiting to be filed. I mean, figure out the truth, I said carefully, about what we both want, about what's really going on. What's really going on? She repeated, and there was something strange in her voice. Not quite mockery, but close. What do you think is going on, Marcus? This was dangerous territory. I needed to retreat, regroup, stick to the plan. Don't let her know you're suspicious. Don't show your hand. I think we've both been unhappy for a while, I said, choosing my words like I was navigating a minefield. I think we've both been going through the motions. And I think we owe it to ourselves to be honest about that. Honest, she said softly, and looked back at her laptop. Yes, let's definitely be honest with each other. The sarcasm was subtle, but unmistakable. I wanted to call her on it, wanted to demand to know what that meant, wanted to grab her phone and scroll through her messages until I found whatever she was hiding. Instead, I poured my coffee and took it to my office. My home office was my sanctuary, a converted sunroom with built-in bookshelves and a view of our small backyard. I'd spent thousands of hours in this room on calls with clients, building presentations, and solving other people's problems while my own life quietly fell apart. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, but I wasn't checking email. I was opening the encrypted messaging app Jason had told me to download. Sure enough, there was already a message waiting. Surveillance team in position. Subject departed residence at 9:47 a.m., heading south on Mass Ave. Will maintain visual contact and report back. Command KM. Kevin Martinez, apparently, the former surveillance specialist Jason had mentioned. I'd never met him, probably never would. He was just a voice in an encrypted chat, a pair of eyes following my wife through her day, documenting whatever she was doing with whoever D was. I felt a wave of something wash over me. Not quite guilt, but its cousin. This was really happening. I was having my wife followed. I was investigating her like she was a suspect in a crime. But then I remembered that message, leave the husband to his spreadsheets. And I remembered something else too. Something from 3 months ago that I dismissed at the time, but now seemed significant. It had been a Tuesday evening, late summer. Sarah had come home from what she'd said was a photography workshop, excited in a way I hadn't seen her in years. Her eyes were bright, her movements quick and animated. She'd talked for almost an hour about composition and lighting and some technique called golden hour shooting. At the time, I'd been pleased, glad she was pursuing her passion again, glad she'd found something that made her happy. I'd encouraged her to do more workshops, told her we could afford whatever equipment she needed. But now I wondered, had there actually been a workshop? Or had that been the first lie? The first time she'd come home, glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from spending time with someone new, someone who made you feel alive again? My phone buzzed. Another message from Kevin. Subject arrived at Flower Bakery in Central Square. Met with Caucasian male, approximately 35-40, dark hair, athletic build. They're seated in the back corner, getting photos now. So it was real. She was meeting someone, and she'd told me it was Lauren. The rational part of my brain said this could still be innocent. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe D stood for something else. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions based on one text message and a history of growing apart. But the part of me that had spent 15 years reading people for a living, the part that had built a career on understanding human behavior and predicting outcomes, that part knew better. I spent the next 20 minutes trying to focus on actual work. I had a presentation due next week for a pharmaceutical client, needed to review quarterly numbers for a retail chain, had 3 calls scheduled back-to-back starting at noon. The machinery of my professional life demanded attention, regardless of what was happening in my personal life, but I couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes, I'd check the messaging app, waiting for updates from Kevin, waiting for proof. At 10:23, another message. They're very comfortable with each other. Physical contact. She touched his arm multiple times, laughing at things he's saying. He paid for her coffee, they're still talking. Sending photos to your secure folder. I opened the folder Kevin had set up. There were 3 images, taken from a distance, with a telephoto lens, but clear enough to make out faces and body language. There was Sarah, leaning across the table, her hand on the forearm of a man I'd never seen before. He was handsome in that casual way some men are, dark stubble, wearing a worn leather jacket. The kind of person who probably rode a motorcycle or taught rock climbing or did something else that was authentic and grounded in ways my corporate existence could never be. In the second photo, they were both laughing. Sarah's head was thrown back, her eyes crinkled at the corners, displaying the kind of genuine joy I couldn't remember seeing directed at me in months. The third photo was the one that did it, the one that turned suspicion into certainty. They were leaving the cafe, and his hand was on the small of her back. Not in a friendly way. In the way you touch someone who belongs to you, someone whose body you know, someone you've been intimate with. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and sat in my office, listening to the sounds of the house around me, the heating system kicking on, the old pipes settling, the wind chime on the back porch that Sarah had insisted on hanging despite my objection that it would be annoying. It was annoying. But she'd hung it anyway, and I'd learned to live with it, because that's what you did in a marriage. You compromised. You accepted the annoying wind chimes and the way she left dishes in the sink and the fact that she could never remember to replace the toilet paper roll. You accepted these things because you loved the person despite their flaws. Because marriage was about partnership and patience and seeing past the small irritations to the larger truth of your shared life. Except apparently, that was only true for one of us. My phone rang, my work line, a client calling about a project. I let it go to voicemail. Called them back 5 minutes later, apologetic and professional, the consummate consultant ready to solve their problems even while my own life was imploding. By the time my scheduled conference call started, Sarah had been at the cafe for nearly 2 hours. Kevin sent one more update. Subject and unknown male departing together, following to see where they go next. Will update within the hour. I put on my headphones and joined my first call. 8 people from across the country, talking about supply chain optimization and quarterly forecasts. I participated where I needed to, made the right noises at the right times, contributed valuable insights that would probably save this company several $100,000. And the entire time, part of my brain was elsewhere, following my wife through Cambridge with a stranger's hand on her back. The call ended at 1:15. I had 20 minutes before the next one. I went downstairs to make lunch, a turkey sandwich I ate standing at the counter, staring out the window at nothing. My phone buzzed. Not the encrypted app this time, but a regular text. From Sarah. Running later than I thought. Probably won't be home until 4 or 5. Hope your calls are going well? I typed back. No problem. See you tonight. Added a heart emoji, because that's what I would have done before, had to maintain the fiction. But even as I sent it, I was opening the encrypted app, where Kevin's latest message was waiting. Interesting development. They went to an apartment building on Prospect Street. Entered together. Been inside for 30 minutes now. I have the address and apartment number. Let me know if you want me to keep watching or call it for today. I stared at that message. 35 minutes in an apartment, in the middle of the day, while Sarah was supposedly having lunch with her college friend. The evidence was piling up, each piece a brick in a wall I was building between my wife and any benefit of the doubt. An apartment, physical contact, lies about who she was meeting, the text message from last night. It was enough. More than enough. I typed back to Kevin, get whatever other photos you can, then call it for today. But I want to know everything about this guy. Name, occupation, background, everything. On it, we'll have a preliminary report by tomorrow morning. I finished my sandwich without tasting it. Started a pot of coffee I didn't need. Stood in my kitchen, our kitchen, and thought about what came next. Because that was the thing about evidence. Once you had it, you had to decide what to do with it. Option 1, confront Sarah immediately. Show her the photos. Demand an explanation. Force the truth out into the open. It would be satisfying in the moment, cathartic. We'd have it out, probably scream at each other, probably say things we could never take back. Option 2, tell her I knew and that I wanted a divorce. Skip the emotional confrontation, go straight to the lawyers. Divide our assets and our lives as cleanly as possible. Walk away with my dignity intact and let her have her D whoever he was. Option 3, keep investigating. Build an airtight case. Document everything. And then, when I was ready, when I had all the information I needed to protect myself legally and financially, then I'd make my move. I was a consultant. I knew how to analyze options, weigh costs and benefits, choose the optimal path forward. And I knew, standing in that kitchen with cold coffee and colder certainty, that option 3 was the only real choice. Because this wasn't just about catching Sarah in an affair. This was about understanding the full scope of what had happened to our marriage. This was about making sure that when everything came out, when we finally sat across from each other in some lawyer's office, dividing 12 years of shared life, I would be the one in control. She wanted to leave the husband to his spreadsheets? Fine, I'd show her just how good I was with data. My afternoon calls went by in a blur. Somewhere in there, I solved a logistics problem for a manufacturing client and talked a startup CEO off a ledge about their burn rate. I was good at this, compartmentalizing, focusing on what needed to be done, regardless of what I was feeling. It was after 4:30 when I heard the front door open. Sarah's footsteps in the hallway, the sound of her keys hitting the bowl on the entry table. I was in the kitchen, making myself look busy with meal prep, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry we'd probably eat in silence or not at all. Hey, she said, appearing in the doorway. Sorry I'm so late. I looked up, saw her standing there. She'd changed clothes since this morning, was wearing different jeans, a different shirt. Her hair was different too, down instead of up, looking recently brushed. No worries, I said. How was lunch with Lauren? The question hung there, an invisible test. Oh, good to catch up. We talked for hours. Her eyes slid away from mine as she said it. I'm going to grab a shower before dinner. Sure, I said. Take your time. I watched her leave, listened to her footsteps on the stairs, heard the master bathroom door close, the shower start running. I put down the knife I was holding and pulled out my phone. Opened the photo folder Kevin had sent. Looked at the image of my wife laughing with a stranger, her hand on his arm, her face lit with happiness I couldn't give her. Then I looked at the vegetables I was chopping for a dinner we'd pretend to enjoy, in a house we'd pretend was still a home, in a marriage that existed now only as an elaborate performance for an audience of 2. I picked up the knife and went back to chopping. Clean, precise cuts, methodical, controlled. By the time Sarah came back downstairs, showered and changed into yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, I had dinner almost ready. She set the table without being asked. Another piece of familiar choreography from better times. We ate. We talked about surface things. A news article she'd read. A problem with the gutters I'd noticed. Plans for Thanksgiving that were still 2 weeks away. We sounded like a normal couple, having a normal Friday evening. We sounded like liars. After dinner, Sarah went to the living room with her laptop. I cleaned up the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the counters. Through the doorway, I could see her on the couch, typing something with more focus than our conversation had warranted. Was she texting him? Telling him about her boring evening with the husband? Planning their next meeting? I finished in the kitchen and announced I had more work to do. Went back to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. Kevin had sent his preliminary report. Subject identified as Daniel Whitmore, age 38. Freelance photographer and art instructor at MassArt. Divorced, no children, resident of Cambridge for 6 years. No criminal record. Active on social media. Instagram handle at D. Whitmore Photo. Appears to specialize in portrait and street photography. Cross-referenced with your wife's social media. They've been liking each other's posts for approximately 4 months. First direct interaction appears to be a comment he left on one of her photos in July. Incredible composition. Would love to talk shop sometime if you're ever free for coffee. She responded, that would be great. Let's make it happen. Based on their social media interaction and today's surveillance, estimate relationship has been ongoing for 3 to 4 months. I clicked on the Instagram link. Daniel Whitmore's profile loaded, a grid of photographs that were admittedly quite good. Urban landscapes, candid portraits, the kind of artistic eye that could see beauty in everyday moments. I scrolled through his posts, found one from 2 weeks ago, a black and white photo of hands holding a coffee cup taken from above. The caption, sometimes the best conversations happen in the quiet moments. In the comments, my wife had written, this is beautiful, you have such a gift for seeing what others miss. He'd replied, takes one to know one. I kept scrolling, found more comments, more likes, more digital breadcrumbs of a relationship that had been happening in plain sight while I'd been oblivious. There was a photo from a month ago, a sunset over the Charles River. Sarah had commented, I need to get back to shooting like this. You make it look easy. His response, come shoot with me sometime. I'll show you my favorite spots. Her reply, I'd love that. And apparently she had. Loved it. Loved him, maybe. Or at least loved who she was when she was with him. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark of my office, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere in the living room, Sarah was probably still online, probably still talking to him, probably feeling grateful she'd found someone who understood her in ways I apparently didn't. My phone buzzed. Jason, calling rather than texting. Marcus, you okay? Define okay. That bad? I told him about the surveillance, the photos, the cafe, the apartment. The Instagram trail that showed this had been going on for months, while I'd been working late and traveling for clients and generally being exactly the kind of husband Sarah apparently didn't want. Shit, man, I'm sorry. Are you, though? The words came out harsher than I intended. You tried to warn me about her at the wedding. Said something about her not being who I thought she was. There was a long pause. Marcus, that was 10 years ago, and I was drunk and stupid and probably just jealous that my college roommate was getting married before me. Don't make this about something I said when I was 26. But you were right. Maybe. Or maybe things changed. People grow apart. It happens. You think that's what happened? We just grew apart? I think, Jason said carefully, then, that sometimes people fall out of love. And sometimes they find someone else who makes them feel the way they used to feel. The weekend passed in a haze of forced normalcy and private investigation. Saturday morning, Sarah announced she was spending the day at a photography meetup in Boston. Another convenient excuse, another opportunity for me to have Kevin follow her, while I stayed home and pretended to catch up on work. Kevin's report that evening confirmed what I already suspected. Sarah had met Daniel again, this time at the Boston Public Garden. They'd spent 4 hours together, walking the paths, sitting by the pond. At one point, sharing what looked like a very intimate conversation on a bench near the Make Way for Duckling statues. The photos Kevin sent were almost artistic in their composition. My wife and her lover framed against autumn foliage, their body language telling a story my marriage had apparently stopped telling long ago. In one image, Daniel had his arm around her shoulders. In another, she was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder while they watched people pass by. They looked happy. They looked right together. They looked like something I'd convinced myself Sarah and I still were, despite all evidence to the contrary. Sunday was worse because Sarah stayed home. We existed in the same space, orbiting each other like binary stars caught in a dying system, close enough to affect each other, gravitationally but never quite touching. She worked on her laptop in the living room while I pretended to read in my office. We made lunch separately. When we passed in the hallway, we offered tight smiles and empty pleasantries and need anything from the store? No, I'm fine. Okay, I'll probably go out for a bit later. Sure, have fun. The kind of exchanges you'd have with a roommate you barely knew, not a person you'd pledged your life to. That evening, as I was making dinner, a pasta dish we used to enjoy together, though I wasn't sure why I bothered, Sarah came into the kitchen with an expression I couldn't quite read. Marcus, we should probably talk about logistics. I set down the wooden spoon I'd been using to stir sauce. Logistics. For the divorce. I've been thinking about it, and I don't want this to get ugly. We should probably try to be civilized about the whole thing. Civilized. She wanted to be civilized. While she was carrying on an affair she thought I didn't know about. What did you have in mind? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, even though I wanted to grab her phone and show her the photos Kevin had taken, wanted to demand she stop pretending this was a mutual, amicable decision. I think we should do mediation instead of lawyers. Split things 50-50. I'm not interested in taking you to the cleaners or anything like that. I just want out. Out, I repeated. Marcus, come on. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We both know this marriage has been over for a while. Let's just be adults about it. Be adults. Code for, let's make this easy for me while I transition from your wife to Daniel Whitmore's girlfriend without any messy complications. How long? I heard myself ask. What? How long has it been over? When did you check out? I'd just like to know when I should mark it on the calendar. The death date of our marriage. She looked uncomfortable. And good. She should be uncomfortable. She should feel something other than this cool, clinical detachment she was displaying. I don't think that's a productive question. Humor me. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her response, trying to figure out how honest she could be without starting a fight. I don't know, she said finally. It wasn't one day, it was gradual. We got busy. You got busy. Busy. We stopped talking about real things. We became this. She gestured around the kitchen at our expensive appliances and designer backsplash and the life we'd curated. We became a successful-looking couple with nothing underneath the surface. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. When was the last time we had sex, Marcus? When was the last time you looked at me and actually saw me, not just the wife who manages your household? The questions hit like punches, mainly because I didn't have good answers. When was the last time we'd been intimate? 6 weeks? 2 months? I honestly couldn't remember. You could have talked to me, I said. If you were unhappy, you could have told me. I did tell you. I've been telling you for 2 years. You just weren't listening. So your solution was to find someone else? The words were out before I could stop them. Sarah's eyes went wide, and I saw panic flash across her face before she schooled it into careful neutrality. What are you talking about? This was the moment. I could play dumb, walk it back, pretend I'd just made a wild accusation with no basis, in fact, keep gathering evidence, stick to the plan, or I could blow it all open right now. I chose a middle path. I'm saying that it seems convenient. You want a divorce and you're pushing for a quick 50-50 split with no lawyers. It makes me wonder if there's a reason you want to move fast, if there's something or someone you're rushing toward. You think I'm having an affair? She said it with just the right amount of incredulity, and if I hadn't seen Kevin's photos, I might have believed her. Are you? That's insulting. It's a simple yes or no question, Sarah. She stared at me for a long moment. I watched her calculate, watched her decide how to play this. No, she said finally. I'm not having an affair. I just want out of a marriage that makes me miserable. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, I thought. Yes, it is. Because I've seen the photos. I've read the messages. I know you're lying to my face while asking me to be civilized about our divorce. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I just nodded slowly. Okay, if you say so. I do say so. Her voice had an edge now. And honestly, the fact that you'd even accuse me of that says a lot about where we are. You don't trust me. Maybe you never did. It was a masterful deflection, turning my accusation into evidence of my failings, making my suspicion the problem rather than her betrayal. If I hadn't been a consultant trained in reading people, trained in spotting manipulation tactics, I might have fallen for it, might have apologized, might have let her gaslight me into believing I was the paranoid one. Instead, I just turned back to the stove. The pasta will be ready in 10 minutes if you want to eat. I'm not hungry anymore. She left the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the guest room door close with a definitive click. I stood there alone, stirring pasta sauce that nobody would eat, thinking about lies and logistics and the calibrated performance we were both putting on. The difference was, I knew she was performing. She still thought I was oblivious. That asymmetry of information, that advantage, was the only thing keeping me steady. Monday morning brought a return to routine. Sarah left early for what she claimed was a yoga class. I worked from home again, my calendar full of video calls with clients who needed my expertise on problems much simpler than the one I was living. Between meetings, I checked in with Kevin. His surveillance over the past 3 days had established a clear pattern. Sarah was seeing Daniel at least twice a day, sometimes 3 times. Coffee in the mornings, long afternoon meetings that Kevin delicately described as extended time at subject's apartment, occasional evening photography sessions that seemed to involve more intimate conversation than actual photography. I have enough evidence to establish the affair, Kevin told me in our phone call that afternoon. Multiple witnesses could confirm seeing them together. The photos are unambiguous. If you need this for divorce proceedings, you have it. What about financials? I asked. What do you mean? I mean, is she spending money on him? Is he spending money on her? Are there hotel rooms, trips? I need to understand the scope. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I have to ask, what's the end game here? Because the more evidence you collect, the more it feels like you're building towards something bigger than just proving infidelity. I need to know everything, I said simply. When this ends, and it's going to end, I need to make sure I'm protected. That means understanding the full picture. All right, I'll dig into the financial angle. But Marcus, at some point you're going to have to decide what you want. Do you want the truth or do you want ammunition? What if I want both? He said. Then I guess I keep investigating. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and thought about his question. What did I want? Justice. Certainly. Truth, absolutely. But if I was being honest with myself, I wanted more than that. I wanted Sarah to feel what I was feeling. The betrayal, the humiliation, the slow dawning realization that everything you thought you knew was actually a carefully constructed fiction. I wanted her to stop laughing. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I came home with flowers. A mixed bouquet from the grocery store, nothing fancy, but colorful and thoughtful. Sarah looked at them with suspicion when I presented them in the kitchen. What are these for? Do I need a reason to buy my wife flowers? Usually, yes. You haven't done something like this in over a year. Well, maybe I'm trying, I said, setting them on the counter between us. You said we stopped putting in effort. I'm putting in effort. She looked at the flowers for a long moment, and I saw something complicated cross her face. Guilt, maybe, or discomfort, or the realization that I was making this harder for her by being nice. Thank you, she said finally. They're pretty. She put them in a vase and set them on the dining room table, where they looked incongruous and sad, like a prop in a play about a functional marriage. Over the next week, I kept it up. Small gestures, coming home at a reasonable hour, asking about her day, and actually listening to the answers, even when I knew they were partially lies. Suggesting we watch a movie together, making her favorite tea, leaving notes. It wasn't kindness exactly, it was strategy. Because I'd realized something. If Sarah thought I was trying to fix things, if she thought there was a chance I might fight for our marriage, it would make her more uncomfortable. It would force her to confront what she was doing, to own her choices rather than blaming everything on our failed relationship. And if there was one thing I'd learned about Sarah over 12 years of marriage, it was that she hated being uncomfortable. Sure enough, by the middle of the second week, she was starting to crack. Why are you doing this? She asked one evening after I'd made dinner, a real dinner, her favorite salmon recipe, with roasted vegetables and a salad. Doing what? This. The flowers, the notes, the effort. What's the point? The point is that we're still married. And maybe before we throw 12 years away, we should at least try. I thought we already decided we were getting divorced. You decided. I'm just trying to understand if that's really what you want. She looked frustrated now. caught between the easy exit she'd been planning and the complication I was introducing. Marcus, this isn't fair. What isn't fair about trying to save our marriage? You know what I mean. You're making this harder. Good, I said quietly. It should be hard. Marriage is hard. Ending one should be harder. She left the table without finishing her dinner. I stayed, eating alone, thinking about discomfort and guilt and the ways people reveal themselves when their plans get disrupted. Meanwhile, Kevin continued his surveillance. The financial report came back on a Thursday. Sarah had been using cash for her meetings with Daniel. Withdrawals from our joint account totaling about $800 over the past month. Small amounts, nothing that would raise red flags, but enough to cover coffee, meals, the occasional Uber to his apartment. Daniel, for his part, seemed to be funding his side of things through his freelance photography income. No major expenses, no hotels, no trips. The affair was being conducted on a budget, which somehow made it feel more tawdry. But the most interesting finding was something Kevin discovered by cross-referencing Sarah's calendar with her actual movements. She'd been lying to me for longer than I'd thought. Those photography workshops she'd attended over the summer, Daniel had been at every one. That weekend girls' trip to Portland in September, she'd actually been in Boston. And Kevin found Instagram posts Daniel had tagged himself in from the same locations on the same days. The lies went back months, maybe longer. I compiled everything into a document. Dates, times, locations, photographs, financial records. A complete timeline of infidelity. A story told in evidence rather than emotion. And then I did something I hadn't planned on. I called a lawyer. Not for divorce proceedings, not yet. Just for information. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation, listened to my situation and then asked me a question I should have expected but somehow didn't. Do you want a divorce, Marcus? I sat in my office, phone pressed to my ear, and realized I didn't have a clear answer. I want, I said slowly, to not be made a fool of. I want to know that when this ends, I'm not the one who gets destroyed. That's not what I asked. I know. She was quiet for a moment. Here's the thing. If you file for divorce in Massachusetts and you can prove infidelity, you might get a slightly better settlement. But it's a no-fault state. Judges don't really care about who did what. Assets get split relatively fairly regardless. So if your goal is just to punish her financially, the affair evidence might not help as much as you think. So what good is it? Leverage. If you want her to agree to terms that favor you, if you want to skip litigation and mediation and all the expensive drawn-out processes, having proof of infidelity gives you bargaining power. It makes her want to settle quickly and quietly. And if I don't want to settle quickly, then you're looking at months of legal proceedings, tens of thousands in lawyer fees, and a lot of emotional damage on both sides. Is that really what you want? I thought about Sarah across from me at that dining table, telling me she wanted out but wanted to be civilized about it. Thought about Daniel Whitmore with his artistic photographs and his hand on my wife's back. I don't know what I want, I admitted. I just know I'm not ready to give her what she wants. Not yet. Patricia made a sound that might have been sympathy or understanding. Fair enough. Keep documenting everything. When you're ready to make a move, you'll have options. Just, Marcus? Yeah? Make sure whatever you do, you can live with it. Revenge feels good in the moment. But you're the one who has to wake up with your choices for the rest of your life. After I hung up, I sat in my office and thought about choices and consequences, about whether I was doing the right thing or spiraling into something vindictive and small. But then I opened my email and saw a message from Sarah, sent from her phone while she was supposedly at a photography lecture downtown. Won't be home for dinner. Meeting ran late. Don't wait up. And I checked Kevin's surveillance feed and saw the timestamp. She was at Daniel's apartment. Had been there for 2 hours, would probably be there for several more. I thought about Patricia's warning. I thought about Jason's comment that sometimes people just fall out of love and it doesn't make them evil. And I thought about the message I'd seen that first night. Leave the husband to his spreadsheets. I opened my laptop and continued building my case file, adding new entries, cross-referencing dates, creating a comprehensive record of every lie, every betrayal, every moment Sarah had chosen someone else while pretending we still had a marriage. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth to have weight, to have consequences, to mean something. By the time Sarah came home that night, nearly midnight, smelling like cologne that wasn't mine, I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. She slipped into the guest room quietly, probably thinking she'd gotten away with it again. She had no idea I was 3 steps ahead, documenting everything, preparing for the moment when the truth would finally come out. She had no idea she'd stopped laughing already and just didn't know it yet. Thanksgiving week arrived with the kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Our house felt colder still, despite the heating system running overtime, despite the warm colors of autumn decorations Sarah had put up in a moment of maintaining appearances. We were scheduled to host Thanksgiving dinner. My parents, her brother and his family, Sarah's mother, 12 people total, gathered around our table to celebrate gratitude and togetherness, while our marriage quietly imploded behind the scenes. The irony wasn't lost on me. By this point, I'd been running surveillance on Sarah for 3 weeks. Kevin's reports had established beyond any doubt that she was having an affair with Daniel Whitmore. They met nearly every day, spent hours at his apartment, exchanged countless texts and calls. They'd developed their own private world, complete with inside jokes and pet names and all the small intimacies that should have belonged to a marriage. The evidence filled a folder on my encrypted drive. Hundreds of photos, detailed logs of movements and meetings, financial records showing cash withdrawals and unexplained expenses. I had timestamps, witnesses, documentation that would hold up in any court of law. I had everything I needed to prove Sarah's infidelity. The question was what to do with it. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I made a decision. I called Patricia, the lawyer. I'm ready, I told her. I want to file for divorce, and I want to do it in a way that protects me financially and makes it clear why this marriage is ending. Are you sure? Once we start this process, I'm sure. All right, come to my office tomorrow. Bring all your documentation. We'll start the paperwork. That evening, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went through our shared photo albums. Not the carefully curated digital versions we showed to friends and family, but the real ones. Physical albums Sarah had meticulously maintained, documenting our life together in chronological order. There we were at 25, fresh out of grad school, grinning at the camera in our terrible first apartment in Chicago. Sarah's hair was longer then. My glasses were different. We looked impossibly young and impossibly happy. Our wedding day. Sarah in her dress, me in my tux. Both of us promising forever to each other and meaning it. Her mother crying in the front row, my father making a terrible toast at the reception that everyone laughed at anyway. Vacations, holidays, birthdays. The accumulation of shared experiences that made up a life. House hunting in Boston. The day we moved into this place, exhausted and excited, sitting on boxes in an empty living room and eating takeout Chinese food. Sarah's 35th birthday party. I had surprised her with a weekend trip to Vermont, and she'd been so genuinely delighted that for a moment, I'd felt like I'd gotten something right. Last year's Christmas. Sarah opening the new camera equipment I'd bought her, her face lighting up with real joy. I looked at these photos and tried to pinpoint when it had changed. When had that happiness become performance? When had we transitioned from partners to strangers inhabiting the same space? I couldn't find the moment. It was too gradual, too subtle. Like water slowly eroding stone, we'd worn each other down in ways too small to notice, until suddenly there was nothing left. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Working late on client photos, don't wait up. Client photos, another lie. Kevin had already confirmed she was at Daniel's apartment. I put away the photo albums and went to bed alone, thinking about the forms I'd be signing tomorrow, the process I'd be starting, the end I was finally ready to pursue. Wednesday morning, I sat in Patricia's office, reviewing divorce papers. The Massachusetts complaint for divorce form was surprisingly simple for something that would dismantle 12 years of shared life. We'll file on grounds of irretrievable breakdown, Patricia explained. That's standard. The evidence of infidelity goes into a separate document. We'll use it as leverage for the settlement negotiation, but it doesn't have to be part of the public filing unless we want it to be. And the assets? Given the infidelity, given that you're the primary earner, and given the documentation you've provided, I think we can push for a 60-40 split in your favor, maybe better. The house is in both names, but you've been making the majority of the mortgage payments from your income. We can argue that I don't want the house. I heard myself say. Patricia looked up from her notes. You don't? No, let her have it. I'll find something else. I struggled to articulate what I actually wanted. I want her to know that I know. I want the truth to matter. I want there to be consequences for what she did. The consequence is the end of your marriage. That's what she wants anyway. That's not a consequence, that's a reward. Patricia set down her pen and looked at me with something that might have been pity. Marcus, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen hundreds of divorces play out, and I can tell you from experience, revenge never feels as good as you think it will. You can expose the affair, make it public, drag her through the mud legally. You can make her life difficult. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to carry that weight. You're the one who has to be the person who did those things. So what, I should just let her get away with it? Let her walk away from our marriage with her photographer boyfriend and no consequences? The consequence is she has to live with what she did. She has to look at herself in the mirror and know she destroyed a marriage through lies and betrayal. That's not nothing. It's not enough, Patricia sighed. Then let's talk about what would be enough. We spent the next 2 hours discussing strategy. I would file for divorce, but I wouldn't tell Sarah immediately. We'd wait until after Thanksgiving, no need to ruin the holiday for our families. Then, after everyone went home, I'd present Sarah with the papers and the evidence. No dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, just calm, documented truth. What about him? I asked. Daniel, does he know she's married? Patricia raised an eyebrow. Does that matter? It matters to me. Legally, you have no grounds to do anything to him. He hasn't broken any laws. Morally, she shrugged, that's between you and your conscience. I left her office with signed forms in my briefcase and a date set for the following week. The papers would be filed Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Sarah would be served by Tuesday at the latest. One way or another, the truth was coming out. Thanksgiving Day arrived with unexpected warmth, a brief respite from the cold that had dominated the week. Our house filled with family, with noise, with the smells of turkey and stuffing and all the traditional dishes Sarah had been preparing since dawn. She was in her element, playing the perfect hostess, greeting everyone with hugs and smiles, directing traffic in the kitchen, making sure everyone had what they needed. My mother kept commenting on how wonderful everything looked, how lucky I was to have such a capable wife. If she only knew. Daniel's name came up exactly once. Sarah's brother Mark asked if she'd been doing any photography lately, and she lit up in that way I'd come to recognize as her talking about him without saying his name expression. Actually, yes, I've been working with this amazing photographer, Daniel Whitmore, if you've heard of him. He's been giving me some informal mentorship. We've been doing some shoots together, and I feel like I'm finally getting my creative spark back. That's wonderful, Mark's wife Jennifer said. It's so important to have creative outlets. I excused myself to check on the turkey, mostly, so I wouldn't have to listen to Sarah wax poetic about her lover's artistic sensibilities. In the kitchen, my father found me basting. You all right, son? You seem distracted. I looked at him, 68 years old, married to my mother for 40 years, still holding her hand when they walked together. They'd had their rough patches, I knew, but they'd worked through them. They'd chosen each other over and over. Just tired, I said, when work's been intense. He studied me with the kind of perception that comes from decades of reading people. And home? Home is... I couldn't finish the sentence. That challenging, huh? He put a hand on my shoulder and, your mother and I went through something similar about 15 years ago. Almost called it quits. But we chose to fight for it instead. Sometimes that's what marriage takes, a choice to keep fighting, even when it would be easier to quit. I wanted to tell him that wasn't the issue. That I'd been fighting alone while Sarah had already moved on. That some marriages couldn't be saved because only one person was trying. Instead, I just nodded. Thanks, Dad. Dinner was a surreal experience. 18 people crowded around our extended dining table, passing dishes and sharing stories and laughing at old jokes. Sarah sat at one end, I sat at the other, and we played our roles perfectly. The devoted couple, the successful pair, the hosts with the beautiful home and the enviable life. All of it was a lie, and everyone bought it. After dinner, while Sarah was in the kitchen overseeing pie distribution, my phone buzzed with a message from Kevin. FYI, Daniel's Instagram story shows him alone at a bar watching football. Caption, solo Thanksgiving, but grateful anyway. Just thought you should know he's not with family today. I stared at that message, processing what it meant. Daniel was alone on Thanksgiving, which meant Sarah could have invited him. Hell, she probably wanted to invite him, but couldn't because she was stuck maintaining the fiction of her marriage. Good. Let him sit in that bar alone, watching other people's family celebrations, knowing the woman he was sleeping with was playing house with her husband. By the time everyone left, hugs and promises to do it again at Christmas, it was nearly 10 p.m. Sarah closed the door behind the last guest and leaned against it exhausted. That went well, she said. It did. Your mother really loved the sweet potato casserole. She always does. We stood in the foyer, surrounded by the detritus of a successful dinner party, making small talk like acquaintances. I'm going to clean up a bit and then head to bed, Sarah said. I'm exhausted. Okay, I'll help with the dishes. You don't have to. I want to. We worked side by side in the kitchen for the next hour, loading the dishwasher, putting away leftovers, wiping down counters. It was almost companionable, this domestic routine we'd performed hundreds of times before. Almost. Marcus? Sarah said as we were finishing up. Yeah? Thank you. For today. For making it nice for everyone. I know things are complicated between us, but you handled it really well. I looked at her. My wife, who wasn't really my wife anymore, who was thanking me for playing along with the charade we were both performing. Sarah, I said carefully, and can I ask you something? She tensed slightly. Sure. When you said you wanted a divorce, did you mean it, or were you just angry? She was quiet for a long moment, dish towel in her hands, eyes fixed on the counter between us. I meant it, she said finally. I'm sorry, but yes, I meant it. Okay, I just wanted to be sure. Are you are you saying you want to try to work on things? Because if you are, I need to be honest with you. No, I interrupted. I'm not saying that. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Relief flashed across her face, quickly masked, but I saw it. She was relieved that I wasn't going to fight for our marriage. So what happens now? She asked. Now, I said, we figure out the logistics, like you said, civilized and adult. She nodded slowly. After the holidays, January maybe, we can start talking to lawyers? Sure, January. It was a lie. The papers were already filed. She'd be served in 4 days. But she didn't need to know that yet. Okay, she said, January. She went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing the last of the cleanup, thinking about lies and timing and the moment everything would come crashing down. Friday passed quietly. Sarah met Daniel for lunch, Kevin confirmed, while I supposedly worked from home. She came back with that same glow she always had after seeing him, that brightness that used to be reserved for me. Saturday, she announced she was going to spend the day shooting downtown, another lie, another afternoon at Daniel's apartment. I let her go without comment, watching from the window as she pulled out of the driveway, probably already texting him that she was on her way. And then I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I drove to Daniel's apartment building. Kevin had given me the address, the apartment number, even the entry code. I'd spent the past week memorizing Daniel's schedule, understanding his patterns, waiting for the right moment. That moment, was now. Saturday afternoon, Sarah due to arrive in 20 minutes, Daniel home alone preparing for her visit. I parked across the street and sat in my car for 5 minutes, questioning whether I really wanted to do this, whether it would accomplish anything, whether it made me better or worse than them. Then I got out and walked to his building. The entry code worked. I took the stairs to the third floor, stood outside apartment 3C, listening to music playing inside, some indie rock band I didn't recognize. I knocked. The music cut off. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Daniel Whitmore stood there in jeans and an untucked flannel shirt, his hair slightly messy, and for a split second I saw confusion cross his face. Can I help you? Are you Daniel Whitmore? Yes. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm Sarah's husband. I watched the color drain from his face, watched him process what that meant, who I was, what my presence at his door implied. I think, he said slowly, you should probably come in. I followed him into the apartment. It was smaller than I'd expected, but nicely decorated in that bohemian artist style. Exposed brick, hanging plants, photography equipment in one corner. On the coffee table were 2 wine glasses waiting to be used. She told me you were separated, Daniel said, his voice tight. She said you were basically roommates, waiting out the lease on the house. She said she lied. He sat down heavily on his couch, put his head in his hands. Jesus Christ! We had an argument 3 weeks ago, I said, standing because sitting would have implied we were having a civil conversation, and this wasn't that. She said she wanted a divorce, but before that, we were very much married, living as husband and wife, sleeping in the same bed, splitting a life. I didn't know, I swear to God, I didn't know. She's on her way here, right now. Did you know that? He looked up at me, and I saw genuine horror in his eyes. You need to leave, please. This is this is between you and her. I never meant to what? Sleep with another man's wife? Except you did. Regardless of what she told you, regardless of what you meant, that's what happened. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. But she can't find you here. Why not? Let her see that her two worlds have collided. Let her explain to both of us how she managed to lie to everyone. Daniel stood up, and I saw he was shaking. Please. You want to ruin her day? Fine. You want to make her feel like shit? Great. But do it on your own time. Don't use me as a prop in your revenge. Revenge, I repeated. Interesting word choice. Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? I looked around his apartment, at the life he'd built, at the wine glasses waiting for my wife to arrive. No, I said finally, it's truth. Truth isn't revenge, it's just truth. Then tell her the truth. Don't ambush her here. He had a point. This wasn't the confrontation I'd planned. I'd wanted to be calm, collected, in control. I'd wanted to present Sarah with evidence and watch her facade crumble under the weight of documented reality. This was messy and emotional and not at all the strategic move I'd been building toward. Fine, I said. I'll go, but you should know, she's been lying to me for months, maybe longer. And if she lied to me about you, what makes you think she's telling you the truth about us? About anything? I left before he could respond, taking the stairs 2 at a time, getting back to my car just as Sarah's was turning onto his street. I waited, watched her park, watched her check her phone one last time before getting out. She was smiling, that private smile she used to give me, now reserved for him. She walked into his building without looking back. I sat in my car for 5 more minutes, imagining what was happening upstairs. Was he telling her I'd been there? Was she panicking, trying to explain? Or was he keeping it to himself, letting her live in ignorance for a few more hours? Eventually, I drove home, made myself coffee, sat in my office and opened the divorce file. Tuesday, Sarah would be served. The papers would lay out the grounds for divorce, cite irreconcilable differences, begin the formal process of unraveling 12 years of shared life. And attached to those papers would be an envelope, a simple manila envelope containing printed photos from Kevin's surveillance, evidence of her affair, proof of her lies. Not for legal purposes, Patricia was right that it wouldn't matter much in court, but for truth purposes. Because Sarah had spent months living a double life, and she deserved to know that her carefully constructed fiction had crumbled, that the husband she'd dismissed as oblivious had actually been 3 steps ahead, that the spreadsheets she'd mocked had documented every lie, every betrayal, every moment she'd chosen someone else. My phone buzzed, a message from Daniel, from a number I didn't have saved. I told her you were here. She's freaking out. Whatever you're planning, and just do it. Don't drag this out. End it clean. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, Tuesday. She'll understand Tuesday. The weekend was strange. Sarah came home Saturday evening, pale and shaken. She went straight to the guest room without speaking to me, didn't come down for dinner, stayed hidden until Sunday morning. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red from crying. We need to talk, she said. Okay. Daniel told me you went to his apartment. I did? Why? I looked at her standing in our kitchen asking why I'd confronted her lover, as if she didn't understand that actions had consequences. Why do you think, Sarah? I don't. This is so messed up. You had no right. I had no right? I felt my control starting to slip, felt anger rising up. You've been having an affair for months, lying to me daily, and I had no right to confront the man you've been sleeping with? We weren't, She stopped, unable to finish the lie now that it was out in the open. You weren't what? Having sex? Because I have photos that suggest otherwise, and time-stamped photos of you entering and leaving his apartment. Photos of you touching him, kissing him, looking at him like he's your whole world. She went white. You've been following me? I've been documenting the truth. There's a difference. For how long? 3 weeks since the night you told me you wanted a divorce. Since the night I saw the text message on your phone from Dee telling you to leave your husband to his spreadsheets. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, put her head in her hands. Oh God, oh my God. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really think you could maintain two Sepa Tuesday arrived cold and gray? The kind of late November day that makes you question why anyone chooses to live in New England. I'd spent the weekend at the hotel, working remotely, avoiding the house and the inevitable conversations that would need to happen, but not yet. Not until the papers were served and everything became official. Patricia called at 9:47 a.m. Process server just confirmed delivery. Your wife's been served. He said she seemed prepared. She knew it was coming. Most people don't know what being served actually means until it happens. The physical reality of someone handing you papers that say your marriage is ending, it's different than just talking about it. How did she seem? Patricia paused. Marcus, I'm not sure that's a healthy question for you to be asking. I know. Tell me anyway. He said she took the envelope, looked at the papers, and just nodded, like she was checking something off a list. Very calm, very contained. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me had wanted tears, drama, some visible evidence that this mattered. But Sarah had always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping her emotions in check when she needed to. What happens now? I asked. She has 20 days to file a response. Given what you've told me about her wanting a quick, clean split, she'll probably try to push for mediation. Avoid the mess of litigation. And if I don't want mediation, then we go to court and spend 6 months and $50,000 fighting over assets. Is that really what you want? I thought about that question. What did I want? I want her to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally. I want there to be weight to what she did. The consequence is the end of your marriage, Marcus. The weight is that she has to carry the knowledge of how she destroyed it. Beyond that, anything else you try to impose is just you being vindictive. Maybe I'm okay with that. Patricia sighed. Look, you're my client, and I'll represent you however you want. But as someone who's been doing this for 2 decades, let me tell you, the clients who spend their divorces focused on punishment rather than moving forward, they're never happy with the outcome. They win battles but lose the war with themselves. They become people they don't recognize. I don't know how else to be right now. I know, but think about it. Because she's going to respond to these papers, and when she does, you're going to have to decide whether you want resolution or revenge. After we hung up, I sat in the hotel room and thought about Patricia's words, resolution or revenge, as if they were mutually exclusive, as if you couldn't want both. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Got the papers. Can we please talk like adults about this? The settlement you're proposing isn't reasonable. I looked at the terms Patricia had drafted, and I was asking for a 60-40 split of assets in my favor, keeping my retirement accounts intact, and requesting that Sarah buy out my half of the house, or agree to sell it. Those terms reflect the reality of our situation, I typed back. You want out of this marriage so you can be with someone else. Fine, but it's not going to be on your preferred timeline or terms. This is punitive. This is fair. I've been the primary earner for our entire marriage. I've covered the majority of our expenses. And while you were having an affair, I continued to support this household. The settlement reflects that. I gave up my career for you. I felt anger flash through me at that old argument. No, you made choices that benefited both of us. Don't rewrite history now that it's convenient for your narrative. I want to talk to you face to face, not through lawyers and text messages. There's nothing to talk about. You'll respond to the papers through your attorney. We'll negotiate through proper channels. There doesn't need to be any more direct contact between us. That's childish. That's protective. Every conversation we've had over the past month has involved you lying to me. Forgive me for not wanting to continue that pattern. She didn't respond after that. I spent the rest of the morning working, actual work. Client calls and presentations, the machinery of my professional life that continued regardless of personal disasters. At lunch, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marcus Chen, speaking. This is Daniel Whitmore. Please don't hang up. I should have. I should have ended the call immediately, blocked the number, moved on with my day, but I didn't. What do you want? I wanted to apologize properly, not just what I said when you showed up at my apartment. Okay, apologize then. He took a breath. I'm sorry I slept with your wife. I'm sorry I believed her when she said you were separated. I'm sorry I contributed to the destruction of your marriage. If I could go back and change it, I would. But you can't. No, I can't. And for what it's worth, I've ended things with Sarah. After you came to my apartment, after I realized what was actually happening, I can't be part of that. I can't be the person who helps someone cheat. I felt a strange mix of emotions hearing that, satisfaction that their relationship had imploded, surprise that he'd been the one to end it, curiosity about what that meant for Sarah. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you deserve to know. And because, I don't know, because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to take responsibility for what I did. Taking responsibility would have been asking Sarah if she was actually separated before sleeping with her. You're right. You're absolutely right. I messed up. I got caught up in this fantasy of being with someone creative and interesting, and I didn't ask the hard questions I should have asked. I was quiet for a moment, processing this. What did Sarah say when you ended it? She she was upset. Said I was abandoning her when she needed support most. Said I was just like every other man in her life, unwilling to fight for her. Did she mention that she lied to you about our marriage? Yeah, after I pressed her on it. She admitted she exaggerated the separation, said she thought we were practically divorced anyway, so it didn't matter. It mattered, I said quietly. It mattered to me. I know, I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a moment, two men connected by one woman's betrayal, neither of us quite sure what to say next. Are you going to be okay? Daniel asked finally. It was such a strange question. Was I going to be okay? I was 37 years old, getting divorced, my marriage destroyed by infidelity. My entire life plan had been derailed. My trust in people I loved had been shattered. Eventually, I said, yeah, I think so. For what it's worth, Sarah spoke very highly of you, said you were brilliant, successful, accomplished, said she admired you. But she didn't love me. I think she did love you. Maybe still does, in her way. But love isn't always enough, you know. Sometimes people just aren't right for each other anymore. I wanted to argue with that. Wanted to say that love should be enough, that commitment meant something, that promises weren't supposed to be disposable. But maybe he was right. Maybe Sarah had loved me once, and maybe that love had faded, and maybe no amount of trying could have saved something that was fundamentally broken. Thanks for calling, I said. I appreciate the apology. Take care of yourself, Marcus. After he hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. Daniel hadn't been what I'd expected, not smug or defensive, just genuinely remorseful. It didn't change what had happened, but it complicated the narrative I'd been building where he was the villain and I was the victim. Maybe we were all just people making mistakes and trying to survive them. That afternoon, I decided to go back to the house. I couldn't live in a hotel forever, and I needed to start building whatever my next normal would look like. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up. The house was dark, cold, empty, in a way that had nothing to do with whether anyone was home. I went to our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, and started actually moving my things, clearing out drawers, packing clothes, sorting through the accumulated debris of shared life. In the closet, I found a box I'd forgotten about. Wedding photos that hadn't made it into albums. Cards from friends and family congratulating us on our marriage. The guest book from our reception, filled with well wishes and predictions that we'd be together forever. I sat on the bed holding that guest book, reading messages from people who'd believed in us, who'd thought we were the kind of couple that made it. May you grow old together. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness. So happy to celebrate your love. All those predictions, all that optimism, all of it wrong. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. I hired a lawyer. She's going to reach out to Patricia. I think we can work something out without making this more painful than it has to be. I typed back, good, that's the right move. Marcus, I know you hate me right now. I know I destroyed everything, but I need you to know it wasn't malicious. I didn't set out to hurt you. I was trying to survive, to find some happiness. You could have divorced me before starting something with Daniel. You could have been honest. I know, you're right. I should have. I was selfish and cowardly, and I took the easy way out. I own that. Do you? What do you mean? I mean, do you actually own it? Or are you just saying the words you think I need to hear so we can get through this divorce with minimal complications? There was a long pause before her next message came through. Both, probably. I do feel guilty, but I also want this to be over. I want to move forward with my life. Does that make me a bad person? I thought about how to answer that. It makes you human, I finally typed. Flawed and selfish and human, just like the rest of us. So where does that leave us? It leaves us getting divorced. It leaves us dividing our assets and our lives as fairly as we can. It leaves us becoming strangers who used to know each other. That's sad. Yeah, it is. I put my phone down and went back to packing. Found more memories. Concert tickets from shows we'd seen together, restaurant receipts from special dinners, hotel room keycards from vacations. The physical evidence of a relationship that had existed had been real, even if it was ending now. By the time Sarah came home around 8 p.m., I'd moved most of my essential belongings into the guest room. Creating separation, establishing boundaries, beginning the process of untangling lives that had been woven together for 12 years. She stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching me arrange things on the dresser. You're really staying here, in the house? Why wouldn't I? It's half mine until we sell it or work out who's keeping it. I just thought, given everything, you thought I'd make it easy on you by leaving? Let you have the house to yourself while you figure out your next move? That's not fair. None of this is fair, Sarah. You having an affair wasn't fair. You lying to me for months wasn't fair. Me discovering it and documenting it and using it in divorce proceedings isn't fair. We're well past fair. She leaned against the doorframe, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Daniel ended things with me. I know, he called. Her eyes widened. He called you? To apologize. And to tell me he couldn't be part of this anymore. So now I've lost both of you. My marriage and my whatever Daniel was. Your affair, I supplied. The word you're looking for is affair. Don't be cruel. I'm being accurate. You had an affair. It ended. Those are just facts. She slid down to sit on the floor in the hallway, her back against the wall, and suddenly she looked very young and very lost. I don't know what to do now, she said quietly. I thought I had it figured out. I thought I could leave you and be with Daniel and it would all work out. But he's gone and you hate me, and I'm 38 years old starting over with nothing. Part of me wanted to comfort her. 12 years of marriage had programmed that response. When Sarah was hurting, I fixed it. That had been my role. But I wasn't her husband anymore. Not really, and her pain wasn't mine to fix. You'll figure it out, I said. You're smart and capable, and you'll land on your feet, just not with me. I really did love you, at the beginning. I know, and I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. I looked at her sitting there on the floor, my wife, who wasn't really my wife anymore, who'd destroyed our marriage, but seemed genuinely remorseful about it. I believe you, I said. I believe you're sorry, but sorry doesn't fix betrayal. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't erase months of lies. So what do? We do what we're doing. We divide our lives. We sign papers. We move on. And maybe someday we can look back on this and remember the good parts without the rest of it hurting so much. Do you think that's possible? I don't know. Ask me in 5 years. She stood up slowly like she was carrying a heavy weight. I'll stay out of your way. Use different parts of the house. We can coordinate schedules so we don't have to see each other much. That works. She started to walk away, then turned back. Marcus, for what it's worth, you deserved better than what I gave you. I know that now. I didn't have a response to that. She disappeared down the hallway, and I heard the master bedroom door close softly. I went back to organizing my things in the guest room that was now my room, thinking about deserving and getting and the gap between those two things. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Sarah and I lived in the same house, but in different orbits, like planets that had been knocked out of alignment and were slowly drifting apart. We developed routines to avoid each other. She'd use the kitchen in the mornings while I stayed in my room. I'd make dinner while she was out or working in her studio. We left notes about whose turn it was to deal with the trash or the recycling or calling the plumber about the leaking faucet. It was terribly civilized and absolutely miserable. Our lawyers negotiated while we pretended the other person didn't exist. Patricia would call with updates. Sarah had countered the settlement offer. We'd found a middle ground on the house. Retirement accounts were being divided according to Massachusetts law. The machinery of divorce ground forward, reducing 12 years of marriage to line items in a legal document. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects, volunteering for client sites that required travel, anything to be out of the house, away from the constant reminder of what I'd lost. And slowly, gradually, I started to feel something other than anger and betrayal. I started to feel free. Free from the tension that had defined the last year of our marriage. Free from pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Free from trying to fix something that had been broken for longer than I'd wanted to admit. One Friday evening in mid-December, I came home to find Sarah in the living room with her laptop and a glass of wine, looking at apartment listings. Found anything good? I asked, breaking our usual pattern of avoidance. She looked startled that I was speaking to her. A few options. Nothing perfect. Turns out nice one-bedrooms in Cambridge are expensive. Yeah, real estate here is brutal. She gestured to the couch. Do you want to, I don't know, sit, talk, like normal humans? I considered it, then shrugged and sat in the armchair across from her. How's work? She asked. Busy, you? I actually booked a few wedding photography gigs for next spring. People seem to like my portfolio. That's great. I'm glad you're getting back into it. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. This is weird, Sarah said. Yeah. We used to be able to talk for hours about everything and nothing. When did we lose that? I don't know, somewhere along the way. She took a sip of her wine. Daniel called me last week. I felt something tighten in my chest but kept my expression neutral. Oh? He wanted to check in, see how I was doing. He's seeing someone else now, a grad student from MassArt. He wanted me to hear it from him. That was thoughtful, I guess. I think he felt guilty about everything. She looked at me. He spoke highly of you, by the way. Said you were remarkably civil given the circumstances. He called to apologize. It caught me off guard. He's a good person. I wish she trailed off. You wish what? I wish I'd met him at a different time in my life, when I was single and free and not destroying my marriage. Timing matters. Yeah. We sat there for a while longer. Two people who used to be everything to each other. Now just people, sharing space, sharing history, but not sharing a life anymore. Marcus? Yeah? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought about that question, thought about the anger I'd carried, the evidence I'd collected, the satisfaction I'd felt when I'd confronted her with the truth. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm just trying to get through this. That's fair. She closed her laptop and stood up. I'm going to bed. But thanks for talking to me like I'm a person and not just the villain in your story. You're not a villain, Sarah. You're just someone who made some really shitty choices. Yeah, I am. After she went upstairs, I sat in the living room alone, thinking about forgiveness and forward motion and the slow, painful process of letting go. My phone buzzed. A message from Jason. How you holding up? Surviving. Divorce should be final by March if everything goes smoothly. And then, I figure out who I am when I'm not married to Sarah. You're still Marcus. Brilliant consultant, loyal friend, good person who got dealt a bad hand. Am I, though? Good person? I spent weeks having my wife followed. I documented her affair in excruciating detail. I used it as leverage in divorce negotiations. You protected yourself. That's not the same as being a bad person. Then why does it feel the same? Jason didn't respond immediately. When he finally did, his message was simple. Because you have a conscience, which actually proves you're a good person. Bad people don't question their actions. I sat with that for a while, wondering if he was right. Eventually, I went to bed. Lay in the guest room that was my room now, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the wind outside, the distant traffic on the main road. Tomorrow would bring more negotiations, more logistics, more slow untangling of shared life. But tonight I was just tired. Tired of being angry, tired of thinking about betrayal, tired of carrying the weight of what had happened. I fell asleep thinking about spring, when the divorce would be final, when the house would be sold, when I could finally close this chapter and start writing a new one. I fell asleep imagining a future where I wasn't defined by this ending, where I was just Marcus again, figuring out what came next. I fell asleep hoping that maybe, eventually, the hurt would fade enough that I could remember the good parts without the rest of it burning quite so much. And somewhere in the house, Sarah was probably doing the same thing, lying awake, processing everything, trying to figure out how to move forward from wreckage of her own making. Two people who'd once March arrived with that particular brand of New England weather that can't decide if it's still winter or finally spring. One day would bring warm sun and the promise of renewal. The next would dump 6 inches of snow and remind you that hope was premature. The divorce papers sat on my desk in my new apartment, a one-bedroom in Somerville, close enough to Boston for work, but far enough from Cambridge that I didn't risk running into Sarah during routine errands. The papers were thick, comprehensive, the official documentation of a marriage's death. All they needed was my signature on the final page. I'd been staring at them for 20 minutes, pen in hand, unable to quite bring myself to make it official. Patricia had called earlier that morning. Everything's been agreed to. Sarah signed her copies yesterday. Once you sign, I file with the court, and in 90 days, it's done. You're officially divorced. 90 days, 3 months. And then 12 years of marriage would be reduced to a legal record in a filing cabinet somewhere. A story that ended with signatures and stamps and the clinical language of asset division. The settlement had ended up more generous to Sarah than I'd initially proposed. We'd split assets 55-45 in my favor, closer to equal than I'd wanted. But Patricia had been right about the cost of fighting. The house had sold in February for more than we'd expected, and after paying off the mortgage and splitting the proceeds, we'd both walked away with enough for down payments on new places. Sarah had taken most of the furniture. I'd taken my books, my desk, some kitchen items. We'd divided our shared life like we were splitting up after a bad roommate situation, not ending a marriage. Clinical, efficient, remarkably civilized, just like Sarah had wanted. But sitting there with those papers, I felt the weight of everything that had happened. Not just the affair and the lies, but all of it. The good years and the bad, the promises made and broken, the version of myself I'd been when I believed in forever. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marcus, it's Jennifer, Mark's wife. Sarah's sister-in-law. We'd always gotten along well, but we hadn't spoken since Thanksgiving. Hey, Jennifer. Everything okay? I just... I needed to call you. I know the divorce is almost final, and I know it's probably not my place, but I wanted you to know something. I felt my stomach tighten. Okay. Sarah told me what happened, about the affair, about how you found out, about all of it, and she wanted me to call you because she's too afraid to do it herself. Afraid of what? Afraid you'll think she's trying to manipulate you or change the outcome. But she wanted you to know she's in therapy now, has been since January, and she's been doing a lot of work on understanding why she made the choices she made. That's good for her, I said carefully. I'm glad she's getting help. She wanted me to tell you that she understands now. Why you did what you did, the surveillance, the documentation, all of it. She said she'd probably have done the same thing in your position. I don't need her approval for how I handled things. I know, that's not what this is. It's just, she wanted you to know that she gets it now. That she doesn't blame you for protecting yourself. And that she's sorry for putting you in a position where you felt you had to. I was quiet processing this. There's something else, Jennifer continued. She asked me to tell you about something that happened in therapy. Something she thinks you should know. What? Her therapist asked her when she first started checking out of the marriage, when she first knew it was over. Sarah said that she couldn't pinpoint a specific moment. It was gradual, like you'd both said. But then the therapist asked a different question. When did she first realize she was capable of betraying you? I waited, not sure where this was going. It was 2 years ago. You remember when your dad got sick, when he was in the hospital for those 3 weeks? I remembered. Pneumonia that had turned serious, my father in ICU, my mother falling apart, me trying to balance work and family crisis and marriage. Yeah, I remember. Sarah said you were so focused on your family, which was completely appropriate and necessary, but she felt invisible, like she didn't matter, like she was just part of the logistics you were managing rather than your partner. I apologized for that at the time. I told her I was sorry for being distant, that I was just trying to keep everything together. I know, she knows that too. But what she realizes in therapy is that she never forgave you for it. She held on to that resentment, let it fester, used it to justify her choices later. She convinced herself that you'd emotionally abandon her, so it was okay for her to seek emotional connection elsewhere. That's not fair, I said, feeling anger rise. My father was dying. I was trying to. I know, Marcus, I know, and Sarah knows too. That's the point. She knows now that what she did was take a difficult situation and turn it into a justification for betrayal. She knows it wasn't fair to you. Then why tell me this now? What's the point? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Because she wanted you to understand that it wasn't about you being a bad husband. It was about her being unable to handle feeling secondary during a crisis. It was about her own insecurities and selfishness. And she wanted you to know that before the divorce was final, so you didn't spend the rest of your life wondering if you'd done something wrong. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to understanding. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. There's one more thing, and this part Sarah doesn't know I'm saying, so please don't mention it if you talk to her. Okay. I think she's hoping you won't sign the papers. I think some part of her is hoping you'll call and say you want to try again, that you can work through this. That's not going to happen. I know, I told her as much. But she's grieving Marcus. Not just the marriage, but who she was before all this. She's realizing she destroyed something good, because she couldn't handle being uncomfortable for a few months. That's her burden to carry. And it is. I just wanted you to know that when you sign those papers, it's really over. There's no going back. I know. Okay, I'll let you go. Take care of yourself, Marcus. You deserved better than what happened. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. Thought about my father's illness, about those terrible 3 weeks when I'd been running on adrenaline and fear and the desperate need to keep everything from falling apart. Had I neglected Sarah during that time? Probably. Had I been emotionally distant? Almost certainly. But I'd been watching my father nearly die, and I'd been barely holding myself together, and I'd needed my wife to understand that sometimes partnership meant being strong enough to come second for a little while. She hadn't been able to do that. And instead of talking to me about it, instead of working through her feelings, she'd let resentment build until it justified betrayal. That wasn't my fault. I could see that clearly now. But it was sad anyway. Sad that a marriage could die from a wound that small, that poorly communicated needs could metastasize into infidelity, that two people who'd loved each other could end up here, signing papers, dividing assets, becoming strangers. I picked up my pen and looked at the signature line, thought about the Marcus who'd gotten married at 25, full of optimism and naive certainty that love conquered all. Thought about the Marcus who'd discovered his wife's affair and spent weeks documenting it, building evidence, preparing for war. Thought about the Marcus I was now, 38, divorced, starting over, carrying the weight of everything I'd learned about trust and betrayal and the cost of truth. I signed my name. The letters looked strange on the page, my handwriting, but somehow not mine. The signature of a man I was still becoming, still figuring out how to be. I took a photo of the signed pages and sent them to Patricia. It's done. File when ready. Her response came quickly. I'll file this afternoon. Congratulations, Marcus. You're officially moving forward. Moving forward. That's what everyone kept saying, as if forward was the only direction that mattered. As if you could just leave the past behind and step into something new without carrying any of it with you. But I was learning that wasn't how it worked. You didn't move forward from trauma. You moved forward with it. It became part of your story, part of who you were, part of what informed every relationship and decision that came after. The question was whether you let it define you or just inform you. I spent the rest of the day at work, losing myself in a complex supply chain problem for a manufacturing client. It was satisfying in the way only solvable problems could be: clear parameters, definable outcomes, rational solutions. Unlike marriage, unlike love, unlike any of the things that actually mattered but couldn't be reduced to spreadsheets. That evening, I went to dinner with Jason. We met at a Thai place in Porter Square, the kind of casual spot where you could talk for hours over pad Thai and beer. So it's really done? He asked after we'd ordered. Signed this morning. Patricia's filing this afternoon. 90 days and I'm officially single again. How do you feel? I thought about that. Relieved, Sad, both? I don't know. It feels like closing a book I'd been reading for 12 years. There's satisfaction in reaching the end, but also loss, I guess. Even if the ending was bad, there were good chapters. That's healthy. You're allowed to grieve what you had, even while acknowledging why it had to end. Jennifer called me today, Sarah's sister in law. I told him about the conversation, about Sarah's therapy, about her understanding of how resentment from my father's illness had metastasized into justification for betrayal. Jason listened carefully, then asked, "Does knowing that change anything?" No, yes, I don't know. It helps me understand, I guess. Helps me see that it wasn't about me being inadequate or failing as a husband. It was about her not knowing how to handle being uncomfortable. Do you think you'll ever talk to her again? Like, really talk, not just logistics. Maybe someday, when it doesn't hurt anymore. I took a sip of my beer. The thing is, I don't hate her. I thought I would. I spent weeks being so angry, so focused on documenting her betrayal and making sure she faced consequences. But now that it's actually ending, I just feel sad for both of us. That's growth, man. Anger's easier than sadness. And the fact that you can access the grief underneath means you're processing this in a healthy way. Or I'm just tired of being angry. Maybe both. Our food arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. Jason had been through his own divorce 3 years ago. Different circumstances, but the same fundamental dissolution of something that was supposed to be permanent. Can I give you some advice? He asked eventually. Sure. Don't let this make you cynical about love. Don't let Sarah's betrayal convince you that everyone will betray you, that trust is impossible, that marriage is a scam. I'm not sure I believe in marriage anymore. That's different than not believing in love. Marriage is just a framework. Love is the thing itself. And just because one person couldn't handle the responsibility of it doesn't mean the next person won't. You sound like a greeting card, he laughed. Yeah, well, I've been in therapy too, learning all the healthy relationship wisdom I should have known the first time around. Is there going to be a first time around for you? A second time, I mean? Maybe. I'm seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, but she's great. Makes me laugh. Challenges me. Doesn't bring drama or games. Just shows up as herself and lets me show up as myself. That sounds nice. It is. And it's possible for you too, Marcus. When you're ready. When you've healed enough to risk it again. I wasn't sure I believed him, but I appreciated the sentiment. We finished dinner and walked out into the March evening. The temperature had dropped, and there was a bite in the air that suggested winter wasn't quite finished with us yet. You going to be okay? Jason asked as we stood by our cars. Eventually, yeah, I think so. Call me if you need anything, seriously, anytime. Thanks, man, I appreciate it. I drove back to my apartment in Somerville, parked in the lot behind the building, took the stairs to the second floor. My place was small, but mine. No shared history, no ghosts of arguments past. Just a clean slate and IKEA furniture and the possibility of building something new. I made myself tea and sat on my couch, looking out the window at the street below, watched people walking their dogs, couples heading to dinner, college students laughing on their way to some party or another. Life continuing. The world moving forward, regardless of my personal drama. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. I know we're not supposed to be in direct contact, but I needed to say something. I just found out you signed the papers. So I wanted to say thank you for everything you gave me during our marriage, for trying even when I'd stopped trying, for being someone I could count on, even though I didn't appreciate it at the time. I'm sorry I wasn't better for you. I hope you find someone who is. So I read that message 3 times, feeling complicated emotions wash over me. Finally, I typed back, I hope you find what you're looking for too. I hope you learn to be honest with the next person, to communicate before resentment builds, to choose courage over comfort. You have a good heart, Sarah. You just made some really bad choices. Learn from them. M. I hit send before I could second guess it. Her response came a few minutes later. I will. I promise. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Sarah. And that was it. The last conversation with my wife. Ex-wife in 90 days. The woman I'd promised forever to, who I'd built a life with. who I'd loved and who'd broken that love through lies and selfishness. Goodbye. Such a simple word for something so complicated. I set my phone down and finished my tea, thinking about endings and beginnings and the space in between where you're neither who you were nor who you'll become. The next 3 months passed in a strange suspension. The divorce moved through its final bureaucratic stages while I moved through mine. Therapy twice a week, work that kept me busy but not overwhelmed, tentative attempts at rebuilding a social life that wasn't centered around being part of a couple. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious, just coffee or drinks with women I met through apps or friends or random conversations. It was strange being single again after so long, learning the rhythms of first date small talk, the dance of mutual interest or polite disinterest. None of them went anywhere, but that was okay. I wasn't ready for anywhere. I was just practicing being a person again, separate from the role of husband I'd played for so long. In April, I got an unexpected email from Daniel. Marcus, I know this is weird, and you have every right to ignore this, but I wanted to reach out and let you know something. I'm having my first solo photography exhibition next month, a gallery show in the South End, and I'm dedicating one piece to you. Not in a weird way, I promise. But there's a photo I took during that time when, well, it's called The Cost of Truth, and it's about the complexity of human relationships and the price we pay for honesty. I thought you should know it exists. You don't have to come to the show. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted you to hear it from me. Best, Daniel. I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me was angry. How dare he profit artistically from his role in destroying my marriage? How dare he turn our shared trauma into gallery fodder? But another part of me was curious. What photo could possibly capture something true about what we'd all been through? I spent 2 days debating whether to respond, whether to go, whether to acknowledge his email at all. Finally, I wrote back. Daniel, thanks for letting me know. I'm not sure I'll come to the show, but I appreciate the heads up. For what it's worth, I don't hate you. You made a mistake, but you owned it, and that counts for something. I hope the show goes well. Marcus. His response was immediate. That means more than you know. Thank you for your grace. I didn't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it anyway. When the exhibition opened in late May, I found myself standing outside the gallery on a Thursday evening, debating whether to go in. It was a warm night, the kind that reminded you why people loved Boston, despite the brutal winters. The gallery windows glowed with soft light, and I could see people inside. Art collectors, photographers, the kind of culturally engaged crowd I used to be part of when Sarah and I still did things together. I almost walked away. Almost decided this was too weird, too masochistic, too much risk of running into Sarah, who'd probably been invited. But then I thought about Patricia's advice from months ago. Make sure whatever you do, you can live with it. I wanted to be someone who could look directly at difficult things, someone who didn't run from discomfort, someone who chose courage over avoidance. I went in. The gallery was crowded, but not packed. People clustered around photographs hung on white walls, sipping wine, discussing composition and meaning in the way art people do. I took a glass of red wine from a server and started walking the perimeter, looking at Daniel's work. His photographs were good. Very good, actually. Intimate portraits, urban landscapes, moments of beauty found in ordinary life. He had an eye for seeing what others missed, for finding profound meaning in mundane moments. I found The Cost of Truth in the back corner of the gallery. It was a black and white photograph, large format, stunning in its composition. The image showed two coffee cups on a table, one half empty, one full. Between them, a woman's hand reaching across the space but not quite touching anything. The background was blurred, but you could make out the shapes of a cafe, other people, life continuing around this frozen moment. The placard next to it read, The Cost of Truth. Sometimes honesty destroys what lying built. Sometimes the price of truth is everything you thought you had. This image captures a moment of reaching, for connection, for forgiveness, for something that exists in the space between what we want and what we've earned. Dedicated to someone who chose truth when comfortable fiction was available and paid the cost with grace. I stood there for a long time, looking at that photograph, feeling things I didn't have words for. It's my favorite piece in the show. I turned. Sarah stood next to me, holding her own glass of wine, looking at the photograph instead of at me. Hi, I said. Hi. We stood in awkward silence. I didn't know you'd be here, she said finally. I almost wasn't. Debated it for a week. I'm glad you came. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. She'd cut her hair shorter, was wearing an outfit I didn't recognize, looked somehow more herself than she had in years. You look good, I said. Thanks. So do you. She gestured at the photograph. What do you think of it? I think it's honest. Painful, but honest. That's Daniel. He never did know how to look away from difficult things. Is that why it didn't work out between you two? She gave a small, sad smile. That and 1,000 other reasons. Turns out I'm not great at relationship, period. Not just our marriage. You're in therapy. Jennifer told you. She did. I hope that's okay. I asked her to. I wanted you to know I was working on myself, not just moving on to the next disaster. It's good. I'm glad you're doing that work. We stood there for another moment. Two people who used to be everything to each other, now just people, sharing space, sharing history. But separate now, fundamentally separate in ways that couldn't be fixed. Marcus? Yeah? I meant what I said in that text. You deserved better, and I'm sorry I wasn't capable of being better. I know. And for what it's worth, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger forever would only hurt me. So I forgive you, and I hope you forgive yourself. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Thank you. I should go, I said. This is weird, and I don't want to make it weirder. Wait. She reached out, almost touched my arm, pulled back. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it? Any of it? The marriage, I mean. Do you wish we'd never met? I thought about that carefully. No, I don't regret it. We had good years. We built something real, even if it didn't last. And I learned things about myself, about what I need, what I can tolerate, what I deserve. So no, I don't regret meeting you. I just regret how it ended. Me too. She smiled then, genuine and sad and somehow okay with all of it. Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Sarah. I left the gallery, walked out into the warm May evening, and realized something surprising. I was okay. Not happy, not healed completely, but okay. Moving forward, building something new from the ruins of what had been. The divorce would be final in 2 weeks. The 90-day waiting period almost over, the paperwork in its final stages. And then I'd be free. Officially, legally, completely free. Free to be angry or sad or complicated about it. Free to grieve what I'd lost while acknowledging why it had to end. Free to eventually, maybe cautiously risk love again with someone who could handle the responsibility of it. I walked to my car, thinking about coffee cups and hands reaching across empty space and the cost of truth that everyone pays eventually in one way or another, and I drove home to my small apartment with its IKEA furniture and clean slate and possibility. I went to bed that night thinking not about Sarah or betrayal or the marriage that had ended, but about tomorrow. About the life I was building. About the person I was becoming. About the fact that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just healing, moving forward, refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your story. I fell asleep thinking about laughter. Not Sarah's cruel laugh from that first terrible argument, but something else. Something that might eventually sound like my own joy. Something that might eventually sound like freedom. The cafe in Cambridge was crowded with the Thursday morning rush. College students with laptops, professionals grabbing coffee before work, the familiar soundtrack of espresso machines and low conversation that defined Boston mornings. I sat by the window with my laptop, working on a presentation for a client, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Marcus? Oh my God, Marcus Chen? I turned. Emily Rodriguez, a friend from grad school I'd lost touch with years ago, stood there with her own coffee and a surprised smile. Emily! Wow, how long has it been? At least 10 years, probably more. Oh my God, you look great. Can I? She gestured to the empty chair at my table. Please. We spent the next hour catching up. Her work as an architect, my consulting career, the complicated paths that had brought us both back to Boston after years in other cities. So are you married? Kids? She asked eventually. Divorced, actually. Finalized last June. No kids. I'm sorry. That's rough. It was, but I'm okay now. Better than okay, actually. Good. You deserve to be happy. She paused, seemed to be debating something. Can I ask what happened? You don't have to answer if it's too personal. I thought about how to explain it. The affair, the investigation, the careful documentation of betrayal, the divorce that had consumed 6 months of my life and fundamentally changed who I was. We grew apart, I said finally, and then she made some choices that made it impossible to stay together. But it's done now, and I'm moving forward. That's healthy. A lot of people get stuck in the anger. I was angry for a while, but at some point, you have to decide whether you want to heal or you want to be right. I chose healing. She smiled. That's really mature. I'm impressed. We talked for another 30 minutes before she had to leave for a meeting. As she was gathering her things, she hesitated. This might be too forward, but would you want to have dinner sometime? As friends, or maybe as more than friends if we both feel that way? I don't know. I just enjoyed talking to you, and it's been so long since I've met someone I actually connect with. I felt a flutter of something in my chest. Not love, too soon for that, but possibility, interest, the sense that maybe I was ready to try again. I'd like that, I said. We exchanged numbers, made tentative plans for the following week. She left with a wave and a smile, and I sat there for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. A year ago, I'd been signing divorce papers and trying to figure out who I was outside of my marriage. I'd been angry and hurt and focused on making sure Sarah faced consequences for what she'd done. Now I was just living, working, healing, open to whatever came next. My phone buzzed. An email from Patricia, my lawyer. Marcus, just wanted to check in. How are you doing these days? Still on track with your life rebuild? I typed back, doing well. Better than I expected, honestly. Just got asked tonight on a date for the first time since the divorce. Not sure if I'm ready, but I'm willing to find out. Thanks for everything you did to help me through that time. M. Her response came quickly. That's wonderful. And you'll know if you're ready when you're actually on the date. Trust yourself. You've come a long way. P. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at Cambridge going about its day. Students rushing to class. Professionals walking to work. Life continuing in all its complicated, messy, beautiful ways. Somewhere in this city, Sarah was building her own new life. Working on her photography, going to therapy, learning from her mistakes. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd found whatever she'd been looking for. But mostly, I didn't think about her anymore. She'd become a chapter in my story, not the whole book. An important part of who I'd been, but not who I was becoming. I gathered my things and headed to my car. Had a meeting at noon, dinner plans with Jason tomorrow, and now, apparently, a date with Emily next week. A year ago, I'd spent weeks documenting my wife's betrayal, building evidence, preparing for confrontation. I'd been so focused on truth and consequences and making sure she stopped laughing at my expense. And she had stopped laughing. The affair had ended, the marriage had dissolved, the consequences had come due. But the funny thing was, somewhere along the way, I'd started laughing again too. Not at her expense, not in triumph or vindication, just the quiet laughter of someone who'd survived something hard and come out the other side changed but intact. Someone who'd chosen truth over comfortable fiction and paid the cost with grace. Someone who was ready, finally, to risk building something new. I drove through Cambridge with the windows down, warm spring air rushing in, thinking about coffee dates and second chances and the fact that endings, however painful, always made room for beginnings. And in the distance, if you listened carefully enough, through the noise of traffic and city life, you could almost hear it. The last laugh, not cruel or vindictive, just free.